Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 6th episode of the story in which Naruto is civilian due to unforeseen circumstances. Naruto's life is derailed from his intended career. This story is from Ideas Maker, so please support him. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. We've lost him. That's what the 5th Hokage hears when Jiraiya trudge into her office. He came in silently like a ghost, along with the heavy depression you could almost mistake him as a zombie. It's no wonder she almost didn't recognize him. Jiraiya, what are you talking about? Who did we lose? We lost Naruto. We lost Minato and Kushina's kid. Tsunade's starting to worry, not in what he said but actually on her wayward ex-teammate. It's not often that she see him like this. This is worse than the last time she saw him, when he first left looking for Naruto. Calm down Jiraiya, tell me from the beginning what happened. Thankfully, he can at least report, so she can rule out genjutsu. Skipping over his journey, Tsunade listened attentively to how he approaches Naruto and their interactions. While it ended in failure, she couldn't see how this connected to his sorry state. However, as he continues she can see that there's more to the story than just their meeting. I didn't want to bring up his parents nor tell him who I am. I was his godfather but doing so would only be counterproductive. Clearly she can see that he's using the past tense. Is he no longer his godfather? Nevertheless, Tsunade didn't say any but nodded in understanding. Having also read the report, she too agreed in his assessment and decision. So I spent most of my time trying to reason with him. You should have been there to hear it, Haim. The kid had his own set of adventures. Tsunade couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as she wonders what adventure a civilian could get that could rival ninjas. Did you know that he's somehow involved in Snakeface's change? Something about a painting. ? That's something she didn't expect. She assumes he's talking about Orochimaru's overly weird stance when they were in Tenzaku Gai. It was followed by his story with Sasori and Deidara, who are both Akatsuki members. Rather than getting himself taken, he somehow became friends with them. Of course, the Hokage had to ask him to repeat what he said because it's getting way out of hand. She wanted an explanation, a working theory. At least anything other than what's been told by a teen, let alone a civilian. Was that all a prank? In the village report, Naruto was a known prankster when he was young. Thankfully, despite his godson's uncooperative attitude, the Toad Sannin did subtly steer the conversation to his advantage. He may act stupid and ignorant but he's still a Sannin. Just from the exchange, Jiraiya is able to pick out relevant key details for confirmation. He's maybe a ninja, a Sannin and a sage but most importantly of all he's Konoha's spymaster. Therefore it wasn't difficult for him to later verify, confirm and connect those events. There's also Pain's true identity, with the exception of himself he doubts there are any ninja villages out there knowing who he is. It was for this reason that he knew Naruto wasn't lying or making stuff up. Tsunade too agreed as she too was shocked by the revelation. She may not have been involved but those 3 war orphans are hard to forget. Considering her teammate leaving their group and training them, she can at least understand a little of his feelings. He may have grown powerful but the fact is he's also responsible for Shizen's death so the Hokage's having a lot of mixed feelings. She may hate him for the death of her assistant but she was also the reason that Naruto's life was endangered. Therefore, hearing he left without taking his prize made no sense. Why go through all that trouble in the first place? She doubts he would change his mind just like that. Did Naruto do something? Tsunade couldn't understand it and neither could her ex-teammate. It raised a lot of red flags and a lot of suspicions. Jiraiya, are you sure it's still there? The Toad Sannin immediately what she's asking. Yes, I checked. The kid didn't like it but it was my last request before promising to leave him alone. The seal's still there and the foxes still behind it. The kid couldn't use chakra, I suppose that's how it's pristine and not deteriorated. So, in the end, I followed up my promise and left him. Sighing herself, she can see he did everything he could. Don't worry, Jiraiya. You did all you can. However, to her surprise, his report didn't end there. Before leaving the capital, there's one more thing I wanted to find out. I may have read what happened to him through village reports, however, what I didn't know was what happened to him when he's on the outside. So, I want to find out. Luckily, I knew where to start. Tsunade too can sense where he's going with this. Somehow the Fire Lord seems to know more than he let on, so I thought I should start with him. Anyway, long story short, I ended up heading back to the ex-prison. His female ex-teammate didn't say anything, all she did was listen attentively. From what she can see, the prison is most likely where she will get her answer. Just what did Minato and Kushina's son do there? She's sure that something must have happened because from what she can see, Naruto was sent there by the village. When he resurfaced in Fire Capital, he's clearly a changed person. At least based on the report she had on him, his attitude is very different. So that leads her to the conclusion that she will get her answer from there. She's not far from the truth as she listens to her once teammate. Jiraiya flashback for Jiraiya. The trek to the ex-prison was filled with contemplation and confusion as he mulls over the Fire Lord's actions. What's all that about? It's full of riddles. Last I heard, like all the other daimyos, he were fixated on modern art. It's not surprising since the appearance of Desert Lotus, every nation in one way or another got involved. Now that I think about it, didn't Minato's kid mention something about being an artist? Maybe it's some kind of trend in the capitals. It's no surprise how he thought that because while he was in capital, he did notice a lot of artsy stuff. More shops are selling art equipment and many new art products appearing on shelves. Sasori's ninja figures and Deidara's Big Bang were fine examples. There are even replicates of the Desert Lotus, but everyone knew it's a fake because the original is safely secured inside Suna's Super Museum. Both the painting and museum are one of a kind, and Jiraiya too was surprised how much the world had changed all because of one painting. He heard they calling it the Holy Grail of paintings. Anyway, Jiraiya's still mulling about the stupid riddle. So what's with the riddle? Why couldn't he just tell me directly? Well, honestly, you can't fault the fire leader because even he couldn't be 100% certain. Most importantly of all, he couldn't quite tell the legendary Sannin that his information came from a hunch, a theory, some would even say, a superstition. So, instead of giving him an answer, he gave him a direction. Like Dojima, he too strongly believes Konohagakure is a message. So, he couldn't tell him the truth. Then again, whether Jiraiya can read it is another issue, but it wouldn't have mattered because he will nevertheless find answers from the ex-prison itself. Why? That's because it's where Naruto spent most of his young life. As a ninja, Jiraiya will no doubt find traces of his essence whether he like it or not. And by Dojima's account, the kid had been waiting for his home village to pick him up, but they never did. The other prisoners were less optimistic, thus encourage him to not place so much hope on the ninja village. They were no stranger to betrayal and abandonment, so they made sure the kid won't face too much disappointment in the end. However, despite his joyous outlook, most prisoners recognize the mask he uses to hide his pain. They chose to not tell him but instead treated him like a family. Action speaks louder than words, so they don't really have to say anything. As for Naruto, he may deep down noticed it but too young to understand what it means. Subconsciously, he's grateful, thus why he's more than happy to repay their kindness with his paintings. Dojima may have told him how priceless they are, but he would happy to give them away nevertheless. Since most of the prisoners left, so none of them are available to tell Jiraiya anything, but Dojima is there. In a sense, he was there the whole time watching over him. Unlike the prisoners, aside from the occasion time of admiring his work, he doesn't have the luxury of interacting with him. All he could do is lend a hand administratively. Aside from Ryoma, he's the other that watches over him, so he knew most everything. So, Dojima should be able to supply Jiraiya with all the answers he needs. On the other hand, there's also another reason why the fire leader is being a little less forthcoming with information. This was mostly due to his growing sense of dislike for the inhabitants of the ninja village. Having seen how extreme and fanatic those villagers are for himself, he wondered what happened to that peaceful village that the first Hokage founded. It was only because he's the Fire Lord that he had to show neutrality and objectivity. Additionally, there's also a bit of curiosity on Konohagakure, as he wondered if Jiraiya is destined to see it. Not just to see it physically but to actually understand it. Considering his relationship with its creator, the Toad Sannin is perhaps fated to be drawn to it eventually. Hence, when Dojima first rejected him, he did it with both bitterness and a little curiosity. Bitterness on the ninja village sending someone like Naruto to his prison. His curiosity, however, is something to do with the wall painting, as he wonders if someone from Konoha is fated or destined to see it. So when Jiraiya showed up, a part of him wanted to test this, so he frostily sent him away. When he eventually came back, Dojima knew then that it was perhaps fate. Of course, this all could be a coincidence. However, Naruto's painting is mysterious, so you wouldn't be surprised if there's another force of nature actively in play. Dojima too had heard of his church restoration work. The Fire Lord still couldn't stop talking and praising how incredible it is. One thing that is certain, Naruto is just as Kirito had envisioned. His future is bright just as he had predicted. When the Sannin finally arrives at the ex-prison, Dojima was already waiting. Only this time, he didn't give him the glare as they last met. Instead, it was indifference as he guides him through the premises. Come. As he follows behind the ex-warden, this time Dojima is more forthcoming with information. Since you have met with Naruto, I guess you know by now he was here before the Fire Lord took him in. He didn't need an answer as he continues. Just so you know, the kid spends most of his time looking out for his village to one day come for him. It wasn't until one of the prisoners show him another path did he stop waiting. However, if you ask me, the kid never did stop. Jiraiya wanted to ask something but Dojima didn't let him as he continued. You will see when we reach our last location. As they speak, they reached into the start of the gallery. Please feel free to browse around, there will be no visitors today. So you can take as long as you want. Before you reject my offer. I am doing this for you. You said you want to know about Naruto. Right? Well, the answer is around you. That's where Jiraiya truly starts to look around. The whole place literally littered with nothing but paintings. From what he can see, there are at least hundreds as they fill every space across the walls. Now that he realized it, this is a museum. Is this all Naruto's work? I know what you're thinking. Yes, they are all his creation. To the Sannin, this only gave him more questions than answers. Why are they on display and in a museum? Then again, why was he painting in the first place? If that's not enough, the Sannin had to swallow hard as he stares down the path filled countless paintings. Someone near the back of his mind, he's afraid of the answer. That's a lot of paintings. Just how long was he in prison again? Ah, there's his first work. Turning to the object his guide is pointing out, the Sannin listen attentively to what he has to say. Maybe he can glean something from this. It was first of his many creations, that he gained recognition from Kirito. Kirito? He was one of the many prisoners we had here. He's the one that shows little Naruto how to paint. Although he's just a mediocre artist. He nevertheless recognizes his talent, thus encouraged him to pursue the path of an artist. Well, you saw very well how he's doing in the capital. Jiraiya could not answer back, but he had to acknowledge he's definitely living off better than he did in Konoha. To be honest, Jiraiya's having mixed feelings as he would prefer Naruto to stay the path of ninjas. Then again, it's not like the boy had a choice. Kirito said the boy's a natural, and I wholeheartedly agreed. Dojima is still talking about his first picture. Jiraiya tried to follow with the conversation, but this is beyond him, so all he could do is nod stupidly. He had no idea why the ex-warden is giving it so many high praises. It's not like it's outstanding like ones he's seeing. To be honest, the only artists he knew are Deidara and Sasori. So one can understand how he feels on the topic of art. The two may have mellowed out over the years, but their past exploits were so infamous that it can never be forgotten. Like Sasori's use in corpse puppets, it's not something that can be easily forgiven. His Akatsuki partner's no different, as he literally wiped out a small village for his art. Hence, when the topic on art and artists are brought up, Jiraiya couldn't help but remind him of the two Akatsuki missingnins. Then again, the Sannin still hadn't quite figured out why all this is relevant. Clearly he still hadn't made the connection between his godson and Yuziyu. It's not that far-fetched. He may not look or act like it, but when it comes to Konoha he will carry out his duty like a true ninja. In a way, his duty sense is perhaps more like Itachi. Who's willing to carry out his duty and kill his own family for the sake of the village? Thankfully, Jiraiya never had to make that choice. However, when it comes, he may lean towards the village than personal feelings. Of course, that's just speculation, so we will never know what choice he will make. Anyway, if he had paid more attention he would have noticed the Yuziyu signature, thus became curious. He would be curious because Yuziyu is the first three letters to the Uzumaki clan. It's just too bad that his sources didn't say Yuziyu painting, instead they used the term the elemental nation commonly used, the mystery painting. In the meantime, as he listens to Dojima attentively, he wondered why Dojima had to tell with the paintings. It's like he's more interested in the portraits than Naruto himself. From the way he's preaching them, it's more like boring history lessons back in the academy. Jiraiya can see he's praising them. Too bad he knew nothing about art, so he couldn't. What's so special about them? Why couldn't he just tell me about Naruto directly instead of talking about his paintings? This is like that crappy academy all over again. Obviously, the Toad Ninja wasn't very academic, hence why he was the dead last at the time. Nevertheless, Dojima is still telling him some information about his godson. He just wishes he didn't go about it with paintings. Considering how many there are, the Sannin had to inwardly groan. Is he seriously going to over each one? Kirito did say he's a natural. At first I was skeptical. That's until I lay eyes on his work. The kid's amazing. With his imagination and brush skills he stood out above all. Had Dojima went into more detail on what he meant, Jiraiya might have suspected some kind of sealing. Since he didn't, Jiraiya couldn't suspect anything. Even if he did, he wouldn't know what it is because it isn't like any ninja seal he knew. On the other hand, even if he somehow understood it he wouldn't be able to replicate it. The process may involve using a brush like in seals. There are also some considerable skills involved. It's the same principle as someone knowing how to write does not mean they can automatically draw. So aside from the obvious talent, they need a little artistic sense as well as creativity. Even to a master artist or a forger, duplicating a masterpiece is no easy task. Not only do they need to have a keen eye in the smallest details, but they also had to match the original artist's style. It's essentially, think like the creator and feel like the creator, thus making the duplication process difficult. When it comes to famous masterpieces, many artists had made many attempts to duplicate them. Usually, it's how young students learn from their mentors in the old days. However, in the modern era, such practice is favored by criminal forgers so they can sell the fakes in the place of the original. Still, such master forgers are few, thus one can see how difficult the process is. This is especially true with portraits with Yuziyu signature, as it's impossible to forge. Like Jiraiya, those that knew the creator personally and aware of the talents of the Uzumakis, they too long suspected seals. Unfortunately, due to the creator's oblivious knowledge of his own clan art, they were skeptical. Then again, one has to be a ninja to learn how to use seals. Since he isn't trained as one, they were just as confused as he is. Do you have to be a ninja to use seal? Explosive tags needed chakra as a trigger to activate, so the answer is, yes, you have to have training. Coming back to the prison, to Dojima the paintings were nostalgic, but to Jiraiya it's another story. While he couldn't quite understand what's so special about them, but they gave him a little sense of regret. For some reason, there's a sense of sadness welling inside him. Instead of an artist, I could have trained him to be a ninja. Strangely, he wondered about his feelings. Like all kids, he must be quite proud of himself. Outwardly, the Sanin's expression didn't change, so Dojima moves on. All Jiraiya can do is sigh internally but followed along nevertheless. Looks like this is going to be a very long day. While that's partially true, Dojima's only talking about each painting for a few minutes, but to the Sannin it's a very long and tedious lecture. This is especially the case when he knew nothing about art. However, as they continue, Jiraiya too slowly picking up details only someone like him would recognize. Dojima's right, the kid's always reminded himself of his home village. He can see a little bit of Konoha in every portrait. One literally had Ichiraku ramen stand in the background. It's not something someone outside of the ninja village would know, hence only the locals would recognize it. Moving along, they soon came to one distinctive twin portrait. Even Jiraiya knew what it is and that the two actually belongs together. Now he can see how talented Naruto is and how his art evolved. Anyway, the reason he knew they are one is that he recognized the place. And that's where Momo told him about the slumps. I know the place. Jiraiya finished it for him. He knew it because he was there in one of his old missions. Now he gets a glimpse into how amazing his godson is. From one's perspective, it's two separate and very distinctive places, but once you have been there you will know it's just one place. However, although it's just one town, the artist managed to split it into two. All the elements in one part of the town into one portrait and the rest the other. Although he already knew this, while the two pictures vastly contrast to one another, they were at the same time seamlessly linked. Once you understand that, the Sannin can understand why the painting is so perfect and valuable. Is this the talent Dojima's praising him? Even he had to agree that it's quite ingenious. It's two worlds when you look at them individually. But when together, it became apparent that it's one place. Dojima said that he had quite the imagination. I suppose this was what he meant. It's even more amazing when you learn that he had never been there, yet can still paint it accurately. Alright, he had to admit it looked nothing like the actual town, but it is as Dojima describes it, its essences were perfectly captured. He may not quite understand but somehow managed to get the gist. The two portraits were like day and night, yet there's no mistake that they belong together. Rich and poor, both opposites to one another. It's no different to two sides of a coin. Unfortunately, that kind of thinking is giving poor Jiraiya a headache. He's more of a Hansen kind of a guy, not someone that talks about imaginary stuff. The painting is after all just a painting, so it's difficult for him to take it seriously. He had been to the place, so he knew what he saw. However, from the painting's perspective, it's one seamless world. It's something Noon thought about, the answer had always been right in front of them. Jiraiya was there, even he fell to the way the city governs itself. However, seeing from the portrait it's obvious that the city is just one place. They may have two systems, rich and poor, but they all belong to one country. So when one take the fall, the other wouldn't be far behind. Sadly, like majority people tend to dismiss things that aren't directly connected to them. The two brothers in the portrait was a wake-up call, as Naruto had marvelously pointed it out. According to Dojima, the mayor of that city too was invited, and after seeing this he vowed to change his city. It soon followed with a greater number of entree requests to see the masterpieces. Apparently, the mayor had an idea. He needed these rich and influential people's support, thus he and Dojima cooked up a plan to get this evolution underway. From what he sees, it's working as the royalties all agreed to invest in the city's improvement. At the same time, the story of the two brothers will be the legacy of such a revolution. Having heard that, Jiraiya was shocked because this was news to him. Since it doesn't concern ninjas nor the ninja village, he supposes it's not so surprising that he didn't get such a report. He may not want to say it out loud, but deep down he had a feeling that this was all part of the Fire Lord's plan. The initial invitation to the mayor was a dead giveaway. Knowing that the museum will be opening soon to the public, this, in turn, made him and the other royalties to act. Noon wants to be seen as the heartless or the bad guy, so they all agreed to contribute to the cause. All this only tells him that his godson's paintings can be one powerful motivator. Unfortunately, it doesn't make it easier to understand his art. How can something that doesn't make sense actually making sense? He couldn't argue against Dojima's logic. They are all just paintings and something that's not a fact. So can it influence reality and what people see? From the way Dojima explains it, the art world is complicated. However, with the new additions of Naruto's creation, it's now beyond even art experts' understanding. It's no wonder Jiraiya is confused. Funny enough, what Jiraiya also noticed is that this isn't the first time Dojima's calling Naruto's painting a masterpiece. Instead of just telling him about them, it sounds like he's trying to justify himself in claiming every painting a masterpiece. While art isn't really his forte, he can sense the ex-warden meant what he said. A masterpiece, eh? Too bad he had no talent in the field, so he couldn't quite see its value. Who would know, Minato and Kushina's son an artist? Considering his father being the fourth Hokage and his mother an Uzumaki, you would think he's destined to be a ninja. He may not know what constitutes a masterpiece, but even he had to agree that they are all quite pleasing to the eye. Meanwhile, the tour continues and Jiraiya starts to notice the seasonal changes. Somewhen during the tour, he felt a tightness from his heart. It was shortly followed by a forlorn and heart-wrenching sensation. He may not quite understand why, but his gut's telling him to stop. What's wrong, Jiraiya? We aren't there yet. To his confusion, his ninja sense telling him there's no danger. He couldn't sense any traps, enemies, or anything remotely suspicious. Nothing, please continue, Dojima-san. Having said that, he quickly caught up, yet at the same time, his eyes wander warily over the amazing canvases. For some reason, his instincts are telling him to be very wary, but his mind could not comprehend why. Anyway, as they continue, the Sannin breathed a sigh of relieving that his host isn't narrating every painting. Having seen how many there are, he doubts they could finish by the end of the week. Still, the sheer number he could see is daunting. It feels like a very long journey, an exhausting and endless road ahead of him. They are just paintings, right? Why does he feel exhausting? Then Jiraiya realized something. Dojima-san, I noticed that there isn't any painting about shinobis. Do you know why? Ninjas are everywhere, so the Sannin's curiosity and line of questioning made sense. Didn't the report say the kid wanted to be Hokage like his hero Yondaime? Jiraiya, when Naruto was first transferred here, he did everything he can to continue his training. Clearly, he's hoping to return one day as the Hokage had promised him. However, everyone thought otherwise, myself included. We tried to make him see reason, but the kid never doubted your village leader. So instead of trying to convince him otherwise, we got him into various hobbies so he can forget about the whole ordeal. After hearing that, Jiraiya wanted to blame someone, but at the same time, he couldn't. In his mind, Naruto was meant to be the Destiny Child, and he was meant to be his teacher. Unfortunately, reality seems to change that. Wasn't your chief security a retired ninja? Despite that, he still wanted to understand why Naruto was not trained even when they have already someone. He may not know the guy, but those in charge of security are usually ex-military or rather ex-shinobi. You aren't wrong, but like I said, we didn't want to encourage him on some fruitless, senseless endeavor for some ungrateful individuals. Calling it some is just being polite because when over 70% of the village population are those ungrateful individuals. So as much as he wants to call it Naruto's birthright or destiny, even he can see how weak that argument is. What would Minato think? Jiraiya didn't want to know, nor did he want to find out. What's done was done, so all he could do is leave it at them. Seeing his guest's exhausted look, Dojima too sighs internally. Perhaps he's a little too hard on the Sannin. It's not like he couldn't understand his position. Like the Hokage's position, a Sannin isn't a title that one can just obtain. So Dojima too softens a little of his stance to give him some slack. Come on, Jiraiya. Let's carry on, I will take you to the museum's highlight. Of course, the highlight is its main attraction, Konohagakure. When they finally arrived, even an art novice like Jiraiya is blown away. For a moment he thought he was back at Konoha. It's Konoha, but at the same time it isn't. Even a Sannin like him had no idea what that meant because he had no words to describe his feelings. In all his years as a ninja, he had never seen anything like it. It took him a moment to calm his racing heart and confused mind. Somehow he should feel familiar, but for some reason, he didn't. If he had to say it, it's like seeing the pure version of Konoha. Is there even such a thing? What the hell is pure anyway? Even he could not explain why he would choose that word. He can at least now understand what those Konoha fools were saying. Yes, Dojima had told him about those prisoners. They must have thought it some kind of demon sorcery or a trick, all to confuse them of their home. Idiots aside, he had no idea what made Konohagakure pure. At a glance, it's no different to Konoha. Sadly, Jiraiya's more worried about his report to Tsunade because he wouldn't know where to begin. Unfortunately, the mysteries continue. It's something he should have known. Having a bear witness to his work, he knew Naruto's work is often more than it seems. As Dojima had shown him, his paintings sometimes have multiple angles to view. When he first discovered this he was shocked. So as he pays more attention to Konohagakure, he was not surprised to find more mysteries. It's like Genjutsu, but it let you experience the serenity and nature of Konohagakure. The whole thing made no sense, given the fact that they are indoors and that there are no open windows, yet there's the gentle and comforting breeze. Even the trees somehow looked alive as he watches it sway in the background, yet he sensed no movement. Jiraiya had never felt so confused, his mind's telling him one thing whereas his senses contradict it. He had heard of optical illusions, but he's sure this is way beyond that. Then there's the matter on the details as he starts discovering things he didn't know about his home village. Was Konoha like that? Was that there the whole time? There are things he didn't usually notice are there on the painting. Some of those details made him question its authenticity or his godson's incredible memory. Did Minato's son have an eidetic memory or something? While his attention to detail is uncanny, that's not Jiraiya's main concern. What's alarming is its attempt to frisk him into it. At first, he resisted, but once he realized it's not an attack, he let himself flow with it. The feeling's like basking himself into nature and being blessed by it. There are simply no words to describe that sensation, nor could he understand the fundamentals behind it. Genjutsu? But there aren't any chakra. Since then Jiraiya stayed to try to understand it. Oddly enough, there are also some classy hotels not far from the museum. Since when was this here? It's not surprising because this used to be a prison. Who in their right mind would build a hotel near there? Apparently, thanks to the Fire Lord's efforts, there had been many noble visitors lately. So the place was built purposely to accommodate these people's needs. There aren't just hotels, as there are many restaurants and other establishments surrounding the museum. The place was literally empty, so why so many new buildings? When he turns to his host for answers, all he got was, "It was all part of the Fire Lord's plan." Is the Fire Lord trying to turn this place into some kind of modern art town? He wasn't far off, because this place is essentially the birthplace of the infamous Uzu, and the Fire Lord seems to have some personal interest in it. From the way it's going, it's obviously centering around the museum. You think it would work? Art was a dying breed because there aren't enough talented artists or new work being produced. Even with the rise in Naruto's work, Sasori's and Deidara's creations, it doesn't always guarantee success. To his surprise, Dojima seems to have a lot of confidence in the project. However, what surprised the Sannin more is the source of that confidence. With this many Uzu paintings in one place, would surely be surprised to see it actually failing. His response only made Jiraiya more confused, thus turning to him inquisitively, and Dojima responded mysteriously. Naruto's paintings are special, they have the mysterious effect of bringing you luck. That's another mystery he doubts he will solve. Luck? Why does it have to be that? Why can't it be something more substantial? He may not have seen someone extremely lucky, but he had seen his teammates' legendary bad luck to dismiss it as some kind of hoax. Nevertheless, it's not something he wants to put in his official report, no matter how true it is. Sighing in defeat, he supposes spending some time here is inevitable. That is, if he wants to find out how Naruto became who he is now. So over the next days, he will be hanging around the museum deciphering the wall painting. Dojima will not be with him, but he's available to assist whenever he needs him. Jiraiya didn't expect to solve it on the first day, but after spending the whole morning and finding nothing would frustrate anyone. It's an amazing artwork. He wholeheartedly agreed, but he couldn't help but feel that there's something off about it. The reason he didn't mention it to Dojima is that he didn't know how to tell him. Ninjas are about facts and evidence, so tell him something isn't right wouldn't be enough. So over the next morning, he spent the whole morning frustratingly investigate just that. Sadly, he still hasn't a clue. The wall painting is as Dojima says it is, it's amazing and too perfect, so why does he feel wrong about it? It's been glaring back at him for the whole morning, a nagging flaw that he couldn't find. Just why was he this desperate? Even Jiraiya didn't know why. He was so close, yet at the same time feel so far away. When he felt a growl from his own stomach, he thought it's time to take a break. Perhaps with a full stomach, he will have better luck. He's probably right, because, on his way back, Naruto's older paintings caught his attention. Might as well take a look. He didn't have any high hopes, but he's hoping there's some kind of connection. Although nothing like Konohagakure, the Sannin can deduce that his godson must have tried very hard. Consider how he was neglected in his report, he would no doubt try every way to please his new teacher. Jiraiya may not know what an artist's first painting would look like, but Naruto's painting, while simple, it strikingly quite stood out. It's a simple bowl of fruit, but the shading and angle were perfectly captured. Jiraiya can see the joy in him when he accomplished that. He may not be able to see it, but he can very clearly picture it. Moving on, he continues over on to the next piece. Now, what did Dojima say about this one? As he slowly goes through each one, he unconsciously exposed himself to something that's beyond his understanding. At first, he had mistakenly thought that it was his emotions playing tricks on him, so he suppressed them like a ninja. Sentimentality can be a hindrance when you want information, especially when the target is his godson. However, he soon realized his mistake when he found out it wasn't his emotions that's interfering with his judgment. They are actually coming from the painting? Well, that isn't exactly true, because paintings don't have emotions. It may sound ridiculous, but he's still new at this. So after refining his analysis, he thinks because of his connection with Naruto, he's sympathizing. It's a little complicated, even he had to break it down to get to that conclusion. What he meant is somehow he can sense the artist's emotion through his paintings. Obviously, when he figured that out, it baffled him. How can anyone feel how the artist feels? You have to be a psychic to do that. Yet, he can sense his godson's feelings through these paintings. There must be another explanation. That's when he noticed another small detail among his paintings. He doubts Dojima knew about them because only those from Konoha will recognize it. I will be damned. Isn't that Ikaraku's? What's that doing there? It's a little blurry, but its distinctive colors and setup are unmistakably Ichiraku and no doubt a ramen stand. Now that he thinks about it, some of the trees in his other works are native only to Konoha. His newfound discovery made him revise his judgment on the previously visited pieces. Indeed, there is always a little bit of Konoha in them. He doesn't know what this means. Was it added because he missed his own village, or they were only there as substitutes? However, another thing he discovered is that every one of his paintings have a bit of a Naruto touch in them. Perhaps, he meant it as his style. He is, as Dojima said he is, a trickster. You can almost sense a trick coming just from his paintings to know that there's another secret within. Sadly, there's no trick in knowing that because there's no secret pattern or mark or anything. It also isn't because he's a ninja neither. Only through his parents and having read his personal report did he knew. Yes, that's probably what Kushina would do, and that's how Minato would do it. The kid is literally a combination of his parents, so Jiraiya's least bit surprised by the outcome. He has his mother's mischievousness and his father's genius to do it. However, how he did it was all him. The kid's creative, and the results only made his creations more valuable. People were fascinated. A day later, Dojima came to see his progress. So, how did your investigation go? Well, I went back to his older work to see if I can find out anything. And these paintings are diaries? Dojima didn't say anything for a few seconds before responding. You aren't wrong about that. Naruto did get the inspiration from his fellow inmates. I suppose his paintings are somewhat his diaries. Then Jiraiya turns to Konohagakure and said, I see, no wonder I see a bit of him. Jiraiya didn't know why he said that there isn't exactly an image of his godson, but it just came out as part of the conversation. However, to the Sannin he felt like he could see him clearly. He's like an ethereal image interacting with his fellow inmates. Jiraiya could almost feel his emotions, his curiosity, and his drive to bring his creation alive. Nevertheless, the museum director's response surprised him. You can see it? He didn't know what he's talking about, so he chose not to respond. You know what they say about artists putting their heart and soul into their creation. Jiraiya didn't know how he should respond to that. Aren't they just tales? Surely he doesn't mean it literally. Unfortunately, he didn't quite get an answer. By the third day, if he thought he wouldn't be surprised, he's once again found himself wrong. Naruto's paintings aren't just amazing, oddly enough he discovered that they sometimes contain its own story. At first, he noticed its evolution, how they improve over time. It reminded him of his own student rising to the position of Hokage. However, as he looks deeper he soon discovered it's more than just a simple painting. Aside from the story, he could somehow sense the painter's emotions. Is it the way it's painted or is it the theme? Well, a rainy backdrop is certainly gloomy. Didn't Dojima say that his sensei died? Considering the timeline, it's probably when Kirito died. It was for this reason he went back to check out his other works, and true enough he can sense somewhat some of his feelings. Since there isn't really a lot he could do inside a prison, Jiraiya can roughly guess what he did that day. On one painting, he knew he learned how to play chess because there's a group of people doing just that. The reason he spotted it is because it's in wind country and people don't play chess outdoors for obvious reasons. So some of the inmates must have told him about their hometown while teaching him the game, or someone else did. It's kind of amazing, once he learned how to read them he learned a lot more about his godson. He learned how unpredictable he is as he paints his activities not always in the same way. Some of his finer work has more than one way to view them and the museum made it so the painting can be rotated. It still amazes him, not on the rotating panel but on the concept. Who knew that a sunset can be seen as sunrise and vice versa? Another thing he also discovered is his paintings all have his presence. Somehow even without his signature, you recognize it's his work because they contain a lot of his personality. Unfortunately, that's where he slowly understood what that forlorn sensation is. It was his sense of disappointment and frustration. He can tell his godson's efforts in trying to forget about the ninja village. However, bits of Konoha resurfaced once again in some of his later work. If he's not from Konoha he probably would miss them, so he could sense his frustration. Ramen reminds him of Ichiraku and that, in turn, the ninja village. Although Naruto had stopped painting Ichiraku, ramen still pop up from time to time. By then Jiraiya probably knew what awaits him at the end but he had to see it with his own eyes. Eventually, he finally made it to Konohagakure. Although he had seen it before this time he's more prepared for the extra surprises. Sadly, it was never enough. What he sees is as he feared, unlike the fire daimyo Dojima, what he saw shocked him. This can't be. What he saw horrified him. What have you done, Naruto? The reason he's so horrified is that there's a Naruto there. Not really in person or as an image. It was more of a feeling or a presence. Even he had no idea what it is nor how to explain it. Despite that, he's still quite fascinated at what he's feeling. This isn't just any Naruto as it's an older and more matured version of him. More importantly, this Naruto's trained as a ninja and in his Hokage robe. Why am I getting this? Is this my punishment for my negligence? As far as he could see, this could be what Naruto would be had he been trained as a ninja. With his teaching and training, he would surely learn his father's signature jutsu Rasengan, and summon toads. Eventually, he would learn Senjutsu thus easily making him worthy of the Hokage title. The ethereal Naruto is like a vision, the exact ideal of his dream, to finally achieve peace. The peace and serene feel from Konohagakure is proof that true peace isn't impossible. Naruto was indeed the prophecy child. At the same time, he too can feel what kind of Hokage he is. Minato, the village really screwed up. Despite it's just a painting, Jiraiya can sense how much he truly loved the village. He would have made the greatest Hokage the village has ever had with his dedication alone. By then, the horrifying feeling came back and Jiraiya knew. He knew then there's no way to convince him to return. He couldn't explain how he knew, he just knew. There's one theory but it was so ridiculous even he finds it difficult to swallow. That's because it's somewhat related to the folklore. It's possible that his godson did leave a piece of his soul on the painting, a piece of him that still loves Konoha. Over the next days, Dojima couldn't find him thus knew he must have left. It was expected as he assumed that the message was delivered as it's intended. From the very beginning, he and the Fire Lord had an inkling feeling that this might happen. Hence, they knew it probably wouldn't end well for the ninja village. However, as they say, one's loss is just another's gain. Konoha may have lost someone with Hokage potential but on the other hand, the art community gained a prodigy that's never been seen before. End of flashback. Hokage building. Having listened to his report, Tsunade was speechless. First, she was wondering where he's going with his story. Museum? Paintings? Then, Konohagakure? She was literally speechless in the end by the fact that she had no idea how to respond. It took a little while, before finding the words she needed. What the foo ***, Jiraiya? Are you drunk? You drew your conclusion from a painting? Usually, her teammate would cower from her but this time he's just too exhausted and depressed to care. You weren't there, Haim. Otherwise, you would have understood what I saw. Still, the whole idea is ludicrous. Come on. A painting? A wall painting, he corrects her. She had to stare back to see if he's trying to be funny. What the hell is he doing? What's the difference between a painting and a wall painting? I don't give AF asterisk asterisk asterisk. Show me the proof. You did take a picture, right? Seeing is believing, it saves them the pointless banter and time. Yes, I did. But it wouldn't do you any good. He did take a picture, but as Dojima explains it, it wouldn't be the same. True enough, Tsunade's expression said it all as she tries to see what's so special about it and not seeing anything out of ordinary. She agreed that it's exceptionally well painted, but she couldn't see anything pertaining to his report. Despite that, Tsunade wouldn't outright dismiss her teammate. They knew each other long enough to know when they are telling the truth. Besides, in the ninja world, there's always something to discover. However, this is the first coming from a civilian occupation. Then again, Jiraiya is maybe a pervert, but he wouldn't lie or falsify an official report, especially not to her. Perhaps it is as he had reported it, she has to be there to understand. Seals? She asked. It's the only conclusion she can come up with. None. He may have suspected it, but he answered honestly. At least it's none that I recognize. So, there are seals? No, Haim, but I think it may have something to do with them. It's true, the other possibility is genjutsu. However, if it is genjutsu, he should be able to sense it. Then again, the same could be said about seals because you will need chakra to activate them. So, in a sense, they are back to square one. Still, there's a nagging feeling that it's some form of a seal, just not ninja seal. Consider who his mother was, it's possible that he inherited some innate powers from his clan. His only problem is to somehow prove it. On the other hand, Tsunade's having another headache. This is like the Desert Lotus or the Night Lotus all over again. It's funny that it wasn't Tsunade that couldn't connect Naruto to both paintings. It's not surprising because with the exceptions of the royalties, very few had the opportunity to witness the magnificence of Konohagakure. Anyway, by now, unless you lived under a rock, nearly everyone had heard about the famous painting in Suna. That's because the whole world somehow got dragged into the aftermath that started the Finding the Painter mission. Some ninja village went as far as calling it a curse. It's a curse because like a curse it spreads. Once it came to your village, you are forever doomed to partake endless cycle of that mission request that will result in eventual failure. You could call it the bane of all missions. Some villages went as far as outsourcing it other ninja villages. Sometimes even willing to pay extras to get rid of it. While the major villages can afford it, it's the minor villages that sometimes get the mission. A mission is a mission, so they can't be too picky, but they nevertheless need to produce some kind of result or their reputation will dive. Saying they couldn't find the painter in their report won't do because the client wants to know what lengths they went about their investigation. In a sense, it's a very high-profile mission, so the team will be under a lot of pressure. It wouldn't just their client reading their report, there will be many influential individuals interested what their progress. It's just so unfortunate that any one of them can change the fate of their minor village. In Konoha, the teams rather catch Tora than go on what they dub as lost cause. It's simply not worth the hassle because they will most likely be reporting the same thing and none of them want to be on the receiving end of these individuals' irk. Unfortunately, like a curse, the same mission kept coming back, thus making them repeat the same fruitless ordeal. That's because most of the rumors are fake, so the shinobi's goal is mostly likely hired to eliminate those false leads. It's like investigating some paranormal activity and finding the culprit. Jiraiya, pull yourself together. Your relation with Naruto can wait, we have a war in front of us that concerns also Naruto. Are you going to mop or will you fight for him? The Toad Sannin didn't need to be told twice, he knew what he will do. He may not be there for him, but he damn well will not let him be harmed. Alright, Haim. Tell me what you have. His godson may not want anything to do with him or the village, but he will be damned if he let Akatsuki take him. Internally Tsunade couldn't help but smile. He may be a pervert, but he's indeed the strongest sannin among them. Alright, you may already know. War is approaching and the Bijus are the center of this storm. Long story short, the ninja villages have formed an alliance to fight against the Akatsuki. So far, we have agreed to hide the Jinchurikis away from the conflict, and this decision will most likely include Naruto. Since he's in the capital and under the watch of the Fire Lord, I will talk to him directly. Unfortunately, little did she know that the daimyo would outright reject their plan. To her surprise, the Fire Lord have his own plan, and this was agreed by the nobles, including the other daimyos from the alliance. Apparently, from what she can understand, Naruto will be going along with them. Since Mizukage will be protecting and accompanying their group, his protection is covered. Why put all eggs in one basket, was the Fire Lord's reasonable argument. He's right, with the Mizukage going along, the group should be relatively safe. That is, as long as Akatsuki doesn't Naruto's among them. Unfortunately, assuming the enemies still don't know about him, Tsunade needs to keep such sensitive information on the Benitano basis. This means not telling the alliance about Naruto. It's one tough call because the whole alliance is about sharing information to combat the threat. Luckily, the Fire Lord did say that the other daimyos too are aware of the plan, thus they will support her should things get out of hand. In a sense, the daimyos are like shareholders for sponsoring and putting money in for the ninja villages, and that makes the ninja villages just big corporate companies. Therefore, while the daimyos have no control over them, but they can influence some of their decisions. An example would be nominating the next Hokage. The moment Naruto was sent away and put in a civilian prison, he's no longer in the ninja village's responsibility. By giving him citizenship, the Fire Lord enforced his new citizen status, meaning he has the documentation to go anywhere. Usually, Konoha civilians are automatically given such pass by the civilian council, or for ninjas their Konoha headbands are their identification. Since Naruto hadn't graduated, his identity is tied to the ninja village, thus it would make it difficult for him to move around. On the other hand, what the Fire Lord did was to ensure he has his own identity. Some might see what Naruto do as a ninja art or even an Uzumaki technique, thus they can demand his creations return or even a percentage of the profit. It all depends on the politic, and the Fire Lord just made sure that this was not exploited. So on official channels, the Hokage had no grounds to interfere. Naruto was someone they discarded, so they can no longer claim ownership. It may sound degrading to treat humans like pets or a thing, but that's just common sense in case of potential dispute. Hence, why the Fire Lord got himself involved and putting it in writing. Obito's dilemma, on the other hand, to the mastermind behind the Fourth Shinobi War, one would think he would be chuckling and laughing his evil villainy laugh. But the reality is quite different despite the perfect plan he envisioned. Seeing how he managed to topple Kirigakure and without the Kiri ninjas knowing, it boosts his confidence in his master plans. Over the years, he's becoming quite skilled in manipulating those around him. He didn't need to do everything, only a nudge here and there, the pieces will eventually fall in the direction he wants. Of course, his grand plan also includes the Kyuubi. While every one of his plans are in motion, only the Kyuubi is not going anywhere as it somehow vanished. It's been nearly 17 years, and Noon saw hide nor hair of it. He was there during the sealing, so he knew the fox had a container. Getting the Biju was never his goal that day because he didn't expect to beat his sensei. However, what he wanted to do is to make sure the ninja village feels the same loss he did. He wanted revenge on Minato, especially Kakashi, for betraying his promise to protect Rin. So releasing Kyuubi was just a bonus for causing suffering and misery. Once that's done and it's sealing into an infant, he knew another one of his plans in motion, so he left. Considering the infant's lineage and the importance of the beast, the kid's a high-profile target. Even if the kid somehow died, the beast would eventually reform, thus once again causing more mayhem and destruction. It's not something that can be suppressed or hidden from the world. More importantly, whenever Jinchurikis use their beast's power, its foul energy will linger, so they aren't that difficult to track. Thus, for it to disappear for 17 years, it must be human interference. As many ninja villagers did, they would either seal or suppress them. In Konoha's case, Obito thinks they must have hidden him. He couldn't see the Sandaime doing it, so he assumed somehow Danzo's involved. The counselor's power-hungry ideology was no secret, so he wouldn't be too surprised that the Warhawk had hidden the Kyuubi Jinchuriki among his roots. With the Hokage knowing its existence and not arresting him, many came to see it a weakness. One can say, this was Danzo's way in gloating, "You are maybe the Hokage, but you can't stop me calling the shots from the shadows." Hence, it's no surprise how Obito came to the conclusion that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is hidden among his root agents. Sending Nagato was also a way to force his hand, but none of his agents came to defend the village. Danzo's ambition is no secret, therefore the Fourth Shinobi War was Obito's last-ditch effort to flush out the missing Jinchuriki. Yet to his surprise, Yondaime's kid nor the Kyuubi show up on his radar. Sadly by then, Kyuubi wasn't his only problem. He doesn't know why, but for some reason, the organization is getting smaller and smaller. He knows they aren't infallible, but to disappear without a trace is another matter. It's like they were actively trying to hide from him, which made no sense. Especially considering Pain, who's also the leader. He may have suggested a few things steer events his way, but the decision-making is all Nagato's doing, so why would they disappear? Who could defeat God? Nagato is maybe not in his prime and is in a wheelchair, but he's in no way defenseless. Especially with his paths by his side, as each and everyone are as formidable as the other. Then there's always Konan, that's always traveling by his side. She isn't called God's angel for her looks. Obito couldn't see them deflecting since the two literally founded Akatsuki and doing it for their friend Yahiko. He may have nudged it a little here and there in his favor, so he can't see how the two would betray their own organization. Somehow, it seems more believable that they were defeated. So who or what can abduct God and his angel? Despite how formidable they were nevertheless under close watch by Zetsu without them knowing. That's because the Rinnegan is important to his final plan. So Obito knew about their detour to the fire prison and capital. However, since the civilian city poses no threat to the two Akatsuki members, Zetsu left to report to Obito. Obito too agreed, as he too didn't see the capital a threat. The strongest fighters they have are probably the Fire Guardians. Since Pain can take down even a ninja village and shinobis couldn't do a thing, the civilian city is clearly harmless. Konan probably wants to do some shopping anyway, so he didn't suspect the detour. By the time he realizes something's wrong, it's already too late and the two could not be tracked. So aside from the Kyuubi, the missing Rinnegan is another one of his biggest setbacks. Without those eyes, sealing the Bijus and reviving Madara would be impossible. If that's not bad enough, Sasori and Deidara too disappeared without a trace. While he couldn't comment on the puppet master, but the Mad Bomber's sudden silence is rather odd. Deidara didn't get his monitor for his stealth. Therefore, if he had to go, he would go literally with a bang. What's strange about the whole event is, like Nagato and Konan, Zetsu couldn't even find a hide nor hair of the two. It's like they just disappear out of thin air. At first, he assumed they were somehow defeated, so he sent the zombie duo to take over with the Ichibi retrieval. However, the two were somehow defeated. Another oddity is that the enemy or enemies somehow know a lot about them. They were clearly ambushed, as the two shown no means of fighting back. Kakuzu was swiftly handled as they targeted his hearts, thus killing him instantly. There were 5 patches of blood, so they assumed Kakuzu died without fighting. Haiden was clearly captured through some kind of container coming out of the sand. That would explain the uneven desert sand ditch at the site. It must have snapped him from underneath, thus surprising him. Although the bodies and traps are no longer there, Zetsu and Obito can tell the traps were specifically made for the two. That begs the question. Who would know them well enough to predict their every move? Unfortunately, Obito had no time to dawdle over what happened because the next phase is already started. Like the Hachibi and Kyubi, he will have to get the Ichibi during or after the war. The Kages react just as he had predicted it. The moment he announced the start of the Fourth Shinobi War, they hid the bijus. Sometimes, it nudges like that made capturing them easy. It's just too bad that they didn't realize he had already a contingency plan going. Unknown to the Ninja Alliance, Kisame's defeat was part of that plan. The moment X-Mist Ninja knew he couldn't capture and leave with his target, he set up a contingency plan by making it look like he's been defeated. Aside from making his enemies think he's dead, he bid his time to find out what they will do with the Jinchurikis. This means from the very beginning the Hachibis capturing had always been a secondary objective because their true goal is to find out what happened to the Kyubi. Thus, his announcement of war was just an incentive to nudge them to reveal the Nine-Tail. Unfortunately, his miscalculation is Konoha losing Kyubi. Additionally, there's also the Jiraiya factor where he encountered many obstacles and setbacks in finding his godson. Although near the end he may have found him, that was already too late. By then, the other Jinchurikis are already on Turtle Island. Then again, thanks to Kisame, the secret island was no longer a secret. Tsunade had a number of times tried to bring up Naruto, but circumstances made it very difficult to include him in the discussion. With the moving island discovered, the Alliance didn't need another distraction. Since Naruto's traveling with the daimyos, he should be relatively safe. Even if Akatsuki made it there, there's always the Mizukage. Once everything's in motion, both sides had little chance to deviate. All that's left is to wait for an opportunity. Like in a game of chess, you can't do anything until your opponent made the next move. You can plan ahead, but until the opposition made that next move, all you can do is predict how your opponent can attack or strategize. The same can be said in the Fourth Shinobi War. Once Kisame discovered their hideout, the Alliance was forced to mobilize. They obviously didn't expect their perfect hiding place would be so easily discovered and so soon. Nevertheless, it's a serious issue and their strategy also needs to be revised. At the same time, Tsunade too wonders if telling them about Naruto is actually a good idea. As it turns out, the Fire Daimyo was right, Naruto's safer where he is. Since he isn't very fond of ninjas, he's better off among them. With the Mizukage there as insurance, he's more or less safer than the Jinchurikis now. In the meantime, Tsunade's still at a dilemma as she debates on whether she should tell them about Naruto. Under normal circumstances, it's her duty to inform the Alliance so they could plan ahead and prevent a catastrophe from happening. On the other hand, this is also a direct request from her daimyo, so she hesitated. Despite that, it turned out it didn't matter as she had no chance to bring it up. The moment they finished going over the reports, the war was started. With a new reports that the Turtle Island being discovered, things were escalating too soon to their liking. They were busy formulating new plans and mobilizing their Alliance ninjas. Sadly, that was all part of Obito's ongoing plan. When he said they are predictable, he wasn't joking. They had only two options: hide the Jinchurikis or send them out to fight. Either way, he would win. The moment Killer Bee, taking Samehada for himself, is the moment the Alliance fell to Akatsuki's trap as Kisame lay dormant to spy and later strike when their guards are down. Obito's only miscalculation is the Kyubi. Tsunade never brought it up in the summit was because at the time she didn't know. During the Kage summit, Jiraiya was still searching for his whereabouts. It was the reason why Obito's so confused. Shouldn't he at least be a shinobi? With his lineage, the village would be a fool to not use him. Of course, he doesn't know how Naruto was treated and what happened to him. All he knew is that he's his sensei's son. With Sandaime as Hokage, the brat should be well looked after. Even if the Sandaime fails, there's always Danzo, that bastard wouldn't let a weapon like that disappear. Hence, he strangely came to the conclusion it's Danzo that had hidden him or turned him into one of his mindless root agents. However, in the meantime, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is the least of his problem. Why? As being said, the Akatsuki he had spent years nurturing is slowly falling apart. Their members are disappearing faster than they can anticipate. While he can understand how they aren't invincible, but what he couldn't understand is how some of them would just vanish. Most importantly, the vital piece of his Moon Eye plan lies in the Rinnegan user, and he's also one of the disappeared members. He had an eyewitness, Zetsu, watching him leave the ninja village without even a scratch. So who could be more threatening than the strongest ninja village? Obito didn't count on Pain betraying him because it's his organization. Nagato may not be its original founder, but he's responsible for keeping it together for the sake of his best friend, Yahiko. All Obito did was nudging him in the direction that also benefits him. Hence, the Uchiha wouldn't believe he would forsake it just like that. Still, that begs the question, who could actually take out God? Konan disappearing along with Nagato he can understand because she goes wherever he goes. However, why did Sasori and Deidara also disappear? Like Pain and Konan, not even Zetsu could trace them. Nothing is making sense, so he had no idea what to think. The two are maybe delusional about their quirks, they were the least likely duo to leave. So, what really happened to them? None of them shown any recent suspicious activities, so Obito had no idea what happened. That because their betrayal is recent as they planned it years before. The reason Obito continuing his plan is because of Kabuto. He may not trust him, but if he can revive Madara, his Moon Eye might still be salvaged. Maybe his master can provide an alternative solution. Then there's also the possibility of Nagato showing up or whoever took the Rinnegan coming out. The Fourth Shinobi War, when the war got started, it was Deidara that made himself first known. This happens right when the fight got started. "They're underground," cries one of the censors from the Alliance. So it's already started and it's a surprise attack. Turning to his group, the captain barks his orders. "Earth Jutsu users, ready on my mark. We need to bring the fight to the surface." However, before they could do anything, the whole ground exploded. "Who did that?" "Captain. That wasn't us." "Then who was it? What's happening?" It wasn't the captain that's confused, even the Akatsuki was equally surprised by such a tenon event. Especially Obito, as he immediately recognizes whose jutsu it was. Deidara, you fu ****** traitor. He doesn't know why he did it, but there's very little he could do as he too has to join the fight very soon. With Kabuto and his surprising new additions, he doubts the Akatsuki can lose. On the other hand, with the Ninja Alliance, Sir, Deidara is sighted on the battlefield. What do you want us to do? HQ, what do you think? Meanwhile, at headquarters, the Kages were discussing the unexpected turn. Deidara is dangerous, especially his bombs. He's the most dangerous missing nin we have. However, he's cunning, so he doesn't show up for no reason. Even Inoki surprised by his appearance as he voices his concerns regarding Iwa's most dangerous missing nin. While Deidara's ability is Iwa's secret kenjutsu, he didn't hesitate to provide the Alliance with what they need. Leave him, focus on your priorities. We are at war with Akatsuki. If Deidara is wreaking havoc within the organization, it's better for us. Keep your men in the distance, but keep a wary eye on him. However, just as they finish, there goes another round of explosion that rocked the battlefield. Then the mad bomber left? Sir, no sign of Deidara. The sensors can no longer sense him. Just what the hell does he want? It wasn't just the commander, every Kage at headquarters are equally confused as they turn to the only one with possible answers. Don't look at me, Deidara's always been unpredictable. They can only sweat drop as none of them can think of a reason why he came to the battlefield and somehow fighting the wrong side. Maybe he's really nuts, but Noon said it out loud. As for Deidara himself, he meets up with his partner. "Oh, it's been a while. Nice to go all out the old way." Although through his voice, you can tell he's not really that enthusiastic. It's not surprising, once you experience the colorful and challenging world he's in, the plain old art, as Naruto calls it, is, as he says, one-dimensional. Now that I think about it, it's kind of crap. It's, as the kid says, very one-dimensional. Feelings mutual. I wonder if we have somehow been brainwashed. Brainwash or not, I don't regret it. Again, feelings mutual. There's nothing to dislike about the new lifestyle. Nodding in agreement, Deidara turns back to the battlefield. So, what next? We can thin out the herd, the rest will be easy pickling for the Alliance. Having said that, ninja puppets start to rise randomly all over the battlefield and attacking only the white Zetsus. It's a full-blown confusion everywhere because aside from actual puppets, some of the dead Zetsus became puppets, thus turning on one another. The Alliance turns to the nearest sand ninja, but all they got in return are shrugs of negativity. However, once again Obito knew who's responsible. Sasori, you too? Damn you. The traitorous Uchiha should have known, if Deidara is there, Sasori shouldn't be far away. Strangely, since the Bomber Ninja's first appearance, the two never once showed themselves again on the battlefield. It was only because of the animated puppets and occasion explosions that both sides knew they are still around. While the white Zetsu mindlessly fight on, the Shinobi Alliance too fought valorously but cautiously. They may not voice it, but they were glad those two aren't their enemies. Had Gaara been there, he would have understood the two ex-Akatsuki's intentions. Too bad he's hidden away along with Killer Bee, so he couldn't give them his insights. Just to note, Gaara isn't the Kazekage because Raza is still alive. Still, Raza more or less figured out. They are perhaps here for his son. He followed Inoki's example and told his fellow Kages what he knew of Suna's ex-puppet master. Since he isn't doing anything to the Alliance, they might as well leave him alone. At least his contribution made sense, so they accepted his proposal. Of all leaders, Raza is like a runt, as his past decision-making is spontaneous. However, since the Uzu painting incident, other leaders start to take notice of his change. The Kage Summit and Fourth Shinobi War made them see him in another light. Sasori and Deidara, their story plus flashback, unknown to the organization, Sasori and Deidara had been planning their escape for a long time. Since meeting with the painter, they had been subtly observing every member in great detail. Had they knew then, they would have realized their subtle changes. Too bad, their odd behavior was not picked up, so the two learned more about Zetsu's ability and how to shield themselves from him. Naruto was right, taking their time has its merits. Thanks to that, they are both more prepared than they ever were and disappear whenever they want. With the coincidence of Pain disappearing, Obito didn't know their deflection until much later. The whole thing just adds to the confusion that the Akatsuki were being targeted at 2 points simultaneously. One where Pain and Konan disappearing, and second where Sasori and Deidara also disappearing. This raises also the question that the four was collaborating, but evidence suggests otherwise. However, this doesn't explain how they all vanishing from the organization on the same day. Of course, Obito had no idea that it's happened on the same day. All he knew is Pain and Konan disappearing, Sasori and Deidara never report back afterward. What he didn't know is instead of going to Suna, the two left to warn their friend in Fire Capital. They stayed only long enough to see Pain and Konan leaving before they too disappear into the winds. Since then, they have been monitoring Akatsuki's movements, and they happened to be in Suna when the zombie duo attacked. Well, it was mostly Sasori's doing. Unlike his partner, he took it a few more steps further. By studying everyone, he learned about their weaknesses and at the same time he figured out who's the master manipulator is. The moment Toby showed himself, Sasori knew. However, thanks to his puppet outlook, he didn't give away anything. Toby's stupidity act may fool others, but the puppet master was a master manipulator, so he knew what Toby is. Thanks to his one Sharingan eye, he more or less figured out who he is. Having learned their behavior, Sasori also knew who will be sent after them to retrieve Gaara. Hence, why the two of them are in Suna in the first place. They may not know when they will strike, but they knew which path they will take to leave. That's where they set their ambush. Once they knew how they will act, everything became predictable. Traps were Sasori's specialty, so Deidara didn't have anything to do. I gotta say, I didn't expect it to go so well. It's easy once you knew what they think and how they would act. Haiden's impatient and his immortality made him careless, so capturing him was easy. And Kakuzu? He's a little tricky, but capturing Haiden first is the key, as the shock would momentarily make him lose his guard. So timing is important, and that window of opportunity was when Haiden is captured. At that moment, all I needed to do is take out all his hearts at once. Despite the lengthy explanation, reality shows just how well his plan was executed. Remind me to never piss you off. Sasori would have smiled, but he didn't have any physical attributes to do that. On the other hand, just when Suna was about to mobilize themselves to give chase, Gaara was returned. To Raza's surprise, it was their missing Nin Sasori and Iwa's Deidara that was responsible for his return. Gaara, what's the meaning of this? Don't you know they are missing Nins, they are Akatsuki? Especially Sasori, and you are asking me to let them go. Why? They were the ones that saved me, he said it as it was a matter of factly. Then he added, most importantly they both love art like me. The Kazekage couldn't help but get a twitch in his eye. You are out of your mind, you say I should let them go because of this ridiculous reason? He was interrupted by another surprising appearance. Actually, Kazekage-san, I did like you to let them go too. His son is one thing, but this is the Wind Daimyo. Daimyo-sama, what are you doing here? More importantly, why would you say that? Unlike his son, the country's leader carries much more weight. You know Sasori is a missing Nin, what's his worst is he's also responsible for the last Kazekage's death. While that is perhaps true, I still would like you to give him a clean slate. Raza is obviously stunned. But Daimyo-sama, I can't just give him a slap in the hand. Unfortunately, this is the daimyo, and his words carry a lot more weight. Daimyo-sama? These people are missing Nins, I can't just let them go. Razadono, I think as a leader, you and I both understand the differences between a threat and an asset. In my opinion, I believe Suna would be better off having them around. Daimyo continued. I admit, going along with the rule book has its merits, but sometimes you have to go off script. It's true, there may be consequences along the way. In the eyes of your village, Sasori is still a criminal. However, to the world he's an asset. He didn't say, Sunagakure, he said, world, and Raza picked up on that. Is Sasori's existence better for the elemental nation in general? What do you mean? This time he wants clarification. What? You don't know? Shaking his head as an answer, the daimyo sighed. The man is maybe a leader, but his other senses are less developed. It's the reason why Suna's economy was in the red in the first place. He's so focused on his military. He neglected his village's internal affairs. As a daimyo, it isn't his job to keep the ninja village afloat. Hence, he looks forward to the time when Gaara will eventually succeed him. For your information, Sasori and Deidara are both the master puppet and master firework artists. Sadly, Raza still didn't quite get what he's trying to say as he returns the stare dumbly and answered. I know that Sasori came from my village and Deidara is the mad bomber from IWA. No, you are only thinking about it in ninja terms. Sasori is the master ninja sculptor and Deidara the Big Bang creator, fireworks. Now that the daimyo spelled it out for him, even he recognized what they are. Like everyone else, he thought they were something civilians do. So, Noon suspected the Akatsuki duo. Seeing the look of recognition in his eyes, the daimyo asks. So now you see the bigger picture. While in ninja standards they are missingins. However, on an international scale, they are renowned artists throughout the elemental nation. If you blindly execute them, I will be the one answering to everyone. So, you think we should just let them go? I didn't say that because that's your business, but I would strongly recommend it. Clearly that's what the Wind Leader wants but did not want to interfere with the ninja business. Then he thought and added. Considering the fact they saved your son and returning him safely back to your village. You can use it as an excuse, calling it an act of grace from your side. What are you suggesting? Do nothing with them but focus on your village defense. After all, you don't want to fight a war on two fronts. Deep down, the Wind Country leader wonders if he had to tell him everything. Remember, the Akatsuki just outright attacked your village so your action would be justified. While pursuing your enemies is obvious for any ninja, but you aren't any ninja, you are the leader, so the well-being of your village should be your priority. On the other hand, since the two didn't initiate the attack, instead they brought back your son/village Jinchuriki. So, instead of giving chase, you would seem more graceful if you chose to let them go. Of course, what the daimyo said is all true and making a lot of sense. Since it doesn't give him any political drawbacks or diminish his leadership ability, he took his advice. Obviously it was a sound choice because when the council asked about the event, he gave them the same answer that made everyone look at him in a new light. He didn't tell them about the true reason why he let them go or what he found out about their activities, ninja figures and Big Bang. Raza later learned that the two had been frequent visitors. With their skill, they could no doubt bend in without anyone knowing. Apparently the people that knew are those in art community. As a matter of fact, they were also the ones responsible for delivering them their new Yuzu painting. It's a portrait of redhead baby and blonde woman. Yes, in the anime, Gaara is born with hair. Those from Suna and old enough instantly recognize who she is and who the baby is. Even Raza was stunned by the new sudden appearance of the art. However, he was more concerned about its content as he recognizes the woman he married. Her eyes were the first thing that caught his attention. Despite his past interactions with the Yuzu painting, he never quite figured out why everyone's so fixated on it. With this new addition, he finally understood. While it's in the likeness of Karura, his wife, it was her eyes that stood out above everything else. Although it's just a painting. It was through those eyes that he could somehow sense her presence. Obviously, it completely baffles him. It's a very odd sensation, yet he was not fooled to think that she's somehow alive. After some internal debate, he had to admit it's somehow affecting him symbolically. Consider how she was portrayed, along with baby Gaara. The scene reminded him of what she was like and what his son meant to her. You truly do love your son, unconditionally. It's something he should have known from the very beginning. This was his wife, and now he can see who was truly shielding Gaara from all his assassinations. It was never Shikaku. Gaara's automatic defense had always been Karura. Even in death, you continue to protect your precious child. He couldn't use the word our, because he felt he had lost that right long ago. And what the hell have I been doing? Having realized that, Raza now sees all the mistakes he's been making. Since her death, he had been putting the village above his family. His worst decision was sending assassins to kill her youngest. Although this is just a painting, he couldn't help but find himself feeling the guilt. Karura. I know that you are not really here, but you are so you. Even after what I have done, for some strange reason, I feel you would still forgive me. It's an odd phenomenon. From another point of view it's like being manipulated, but at the same time, it's not. Raza knew he isn't being controlled because his decision is based on how well he knew his wife. If he had to say it, the only thing that the portrait is guilty of is it enhancing or amplifying that feeling. However, he had to admit the image of his dead wife is uncanny and very beautifully made. I think I understand a little what the daimyos are saying. Flashback, Gaara asking for a favor, while Sasori and Deidara are responsible for delivering the painting. It was actually Gaara reaching out to Naruto for that favor. It had been bothering since the very beginning, so he wants to know the truth. Does mother really love me? His uncle first tells him, they both loved him, but in his dying words, he told him the opposite. So Gaara wanted to know. Somehow he's convinced that Uzu can give him what he wanted. He brought it up with his two missing Nin friends and the two were equally curious. Naruto's painting can do many things and they wouldn't be surprised that it can bring out the true feelings of that individual. He gave them his only photo of his mother, hoping Sasori and Deidara can convince Naruto to paint one painting for him. It's irony, they were Akatsuki but today they are playing messenger between the two Jinchurikis. Still, they wouldn't trade their friendship for anything. They befriended Naruto for obvious reasons, whereas Gaara, they found him fascinating. He may not be an artist but his insight was incredible as he often surprises even missingnins like them. Under normal circumstances what Gaara suggests was impossible. At the same time, it's also something none of them thought of. However, from what could see through his many creations they couldn't find themselves dismissing such possibility. They learned long ago not to underestimate him, so they were more than happy to pass on the request. While Gaara and Naruto never met face-to-face but through Sasori and Deidara, they knew each other's existence. They were casually brought up during the conversation. Naruto learned about Gaara when they talk about Suna and the new museum. Aside from his talent, his Jinchuriki status also caught his interest. Whereas for Gaara, it was more of a chance and skill. Surprisingly, it was through Sasori and Deidara that he found out about him. Of course, the two were very careful but somehow still found out, so they want to know how he knew. One day, Gaara took them aside and asked the million Ryo questions. Sasori-san, Deidara-san. Is this individual the very same Uzu painter? Do you really know who she is? Can you reach out to him? I am hoping to ask a favor. What made you think that we knew him and what's this favor? Inquires the puppet master. Unknown to him, he made another mistake calling out his gender by acknowledging he's a him. I knew because the amount of respect you give to this friend of yours is the same as the Night Lotus. Why the Uzu painter? Couldn't it be other artists? This time Deidara's asking. However, Gaara didn't need to respond as he only stared back at the explosive expert. Nevertheless, he answered. Why respect them when you won't even acknowledge one another? Only this individual that you both show such reverence, thus making me think she and Uzu painter is the same person. However, Sasori-san, you calling him a him only made me more sure of my deduction. Did I really say that? Sasori asks his partner only to see him shrug his shoulders. Sasori had sighed, he knew he probably did, so there's no use in denying. He doubts young Gaara would tell anyone, so he told him his name. His name is Naruto, please don't spread it around. Now, what's this favor? So as Gaara explains his favor and his reasons, both missingnins were very intrigued. They had seen enough miracles to never doubt Naruto can do what Gaara want, even if it's from a photograph. Anyway, long story short, none of them were disappointed. Like his usual work, the elegance of his work speaks for itself. It was as Gaara had envisioned, although he couldn't quite remember his mother because he was just a baby then. All he had was the words from his uncle and a picture of her holding him. The reason he requested a favor was that he strongly believes that Naruto can draw out the truth through his painting. As being said, they weren't disappointed as the portrait captured their relationship perfectly. Yes, his mother did love him. Even he can see it now. It wasn't just because of Naruto's painting, because he can see the evidence from his only photo. The painting only acted as a guide or means to open doors to the truth. Once again, he knew it's not fake because he can sense the same familiarity through his sand. By then, he couldn't stop his own tears. All these years, it wasn't the Ichibi that's been protecting him, it was really his mother. Even in death, she continues to watch over him. Sasori and Deidara didn't stay as the two left the moment their jobs finished. They knew the effect their friend's work has on a more personal request. So they didn't need to see or hear young Gaara's silent sobs to know how satisfied he is with the finished work. While they too are equally eager to see it, but they will let their friend have his private moment. Raza too saw how wrong he was. No matter how important the village is, his family should have been more important. While his understanding of painting is minimum at best, but he knew his own wife. Seeing her again only reminds him of his failures. He didn't need to hear her words to know what he did with Gaara was wrong. It is as the researchers say, he can feel her lively spirit from the painting. Calling it her spirit would be untrue because her soul isn't really there, but the portrait serves as a remembrance of his true wife. He will no longer question why it's happening nor how it happens. He just wants to silently talk with her and say how sorry he is. Like his youngest son, he too found it soothing, thus he's often there but only after the museum is closed. Sometimes he would see Gaara as he fell asleep and for the first time, he felt like being his father again. Sadly, the damage has already been done, so he couldn't just ask him for forgiveness. However, when he turns to her portrait, he immediately knew what she would say. "I know, Karura. I know. One day I will tell him the truth." It's hard to admit it's his own weakness that he allowed him to suffer. Despite that, day by day he could feel his wall of inhibition slowly wearing away. So truthfully, he could feel that day is coming sooner than he would have liked. On occasions, people would see the father and son duo side by side staring silently at the portrait. Not one word was exchanged, so many were confused as they wonder what kind of relationship they are having. None dared to ask nor talk about it as they knew Raza used to send assassins to kill off his son, whereas Gaara while mellowing out used to kill to prove his existence. So when they see the father and son side by side, they all have mixed feelings. Maybe one of them will explode, Raza killing his son himself or Gaara snapping and getting his revenge. Then again, there are some that think it's because of Karura. The two wouldn't fight in front of their wife/mother. On the other hand, there are many that approve the new Kazekage. They seem to prefer this leader more, that he prioritizes his family more than the village. It's odd, but at the same time not. This is similar when you are given a job. If you can't handle your own job, how can anyone trust you with a higher responsibility like managing those under you? At least his outward appearance is more calm, more reserved, thus giving others a more intimidating appearance. It's giving people a kind of false image because he's not jumping to a conclusion or someone weak-minded to trying to please you. Raza was intimidating with his position as Kage, but his old ways of handling stuff made him an easy target for the councils to push him around. However, once he's calm and not acting rash, people knew when to back off. Especially when they are crossing a boundary and trying to pass the petition to kill his wife's son. Knowing what his wife would say and how she would back his decision, Raza gained an unbendable backbone. Thus, sooner or later people tend to notice, so will his son and family. Gaara may never forgive him, but the changes are there, so only time will tell. Flashback end back to the war. Pain and Konan. Someone during the war, despite the additional support from Sasori and Deidara, the alliance is still being pushed back. It wasn't that they are inferior, the problem is that the white Zetsus are inhuman. They don't feel pain nor emotion, thus they can literally run themselves into danger without hesitation. Hence, for the less inexperienced they are extremely dangerous. So unless you are exceptionally skilled or abnormally calm, there's a high chance of injury or even death. There's also the fact that they can virtually hide in trees and come out of the ground without being detected. If that's not bad enough, they can even take forms of their comrades down to their DNAs. This makes them extremely difficult to distinguish even to the sensors. Just when they found themselves at another impasse, another unexpected turn shook the battlefield. To their surprise, a husk of the 10 tails was summoned. They didn't know that, and all the captured bijus were released. Without the ninjas understanding why the beast attacked, and somehow they were able to distinguish the zetsus as they ripped them to shreds. While the ninjas watched dumbfoundedly, only one person knew what's happening. Nagato, even you. Obito's obviously furious. Only one with Rinnegan can use Sage's powers and summon the 10-tail husk. There may be someone else stealing his eyes, but Obito very much doubts that. Knowing Sasori and Deidara are working against him, he thinks Nagato and Konan are somehow connected. Did they somehow team up for this? Still, this made no sense as he had both Nagato and Konan on almost constant surveillance and the two groups seldom interacted with one another. Since he couldn't find them, not even Zetsu's extraordinary sense could find them, so all he could do is foam angrily in his mouth. Damn you all. All these years of planing down the drain and he still has no idea where it went wrong. He wanted to strangle someone, but sadly noon's round. However, there's someone else he can vent all his frustration on, Kakashi. Despite the ninja village's condition since Pain's visit, there were fewer deaths than expected. Most were unfortunately buried alive, and with their ninja training most were able to survive until help arrived. The same can be said for Kakashi, as he was about to give his life when the enemies chose to retreat. Hence, when Obito had noon to vent his frustration, Kakashi was the perfect target, as it all started because of him. Because of Kakashi, Rin died. Because of Kakashi, their promise was broken. Because of Kakashi, he's looking like this. He could think more, but just because of Rin it's enough. So will start his revenge on his ex-teammate. Meanwhile, somewhere on the sidelines. You think we're even? I don't know. I heard the market value for one of his work fetched at least 1 million ryo. There are even rumors that Orochimaru paying over 20 million. Nagato could only sigh. Looks like we might never pay him back. Like Sasori and Deidara, Nagato and Konan too were there on the battlefield. They were able to oversee the fight from a distance and away from the main conflict. Thanks to his paths, he can manipulate the war to the Alliance's favor. In a way, this was their penance. Not to the ninja nation but to Naruto. As it turns out, his painting is truly a treasure among treasures. Due to his deteriorating health, he didn't expect to live through the war. However, to his shock and surprise he found himself recovering. While not to the point that he can walk, but he's significantly better and healthier. As ridiculous as it may seem, they had a suspicion it may have something to do with the painting. Sadly, even his Rinnegan couldn't tell him how it's possible. Like those studying the Uzu paintings, Nagato too found himself equally stumped. How could God not know? Although it isn't a bad thing the Rinnegan user hate not knowing. Especially when he has the God's eyes, yet he still couldn't see its secret. Then again, is it really the painting's doing? At least that's what he and Konan think. Waking up feeling refreshed and fully charged every day bound to make anyone suspicious, especially ninjas like them. Again, they had to ask. Is it really a bad thing? They were like Ryoma, see chapter 9, they didn't realize it until much later. One reason being, it's a long time since they last set foot back in their old house, so they thought it's just nostalgia playing tricks on them. However, over time they start to suspect something. How else can you explain feeling top of the morning every morning, even on a Monday? Not that they have to work, but as people wanted by all ninja villages and the Akatsuki, they can't be too careless. They especially don't want to be trapped in someone else's genjutsu. Having failed to understand it, Konan took it upon herself to investigate the strange phenomenon. They may have heard rumors, but seeing is believing, and Conan's worried about the side effects. On the other hand, since she can easily move around, she opts to investigate. Whereas Nagato, he's left behind to investigate its limits. Although he had no evidence, he thinks it might have somehow jumpstart his clan's legendary trait. For obvious reasons, it makes no sense for the painting to magically increase his life. So he assumes it had something to do with his Uzumaki genes, thus giving him the extra boost in keeping him alive. The other possibility is his new lifestyle. As some research says, a happier life, a longer life. At least that's what Conan believes. Nevertheless, it still drove her to investigate. While that's true, her other mission is to keep an eye out on Akatsuki's movements. True enough, despite their absence, the masked Uchiha shortly announces the Fourth Shinobi War. It was just as Nagato had predicted it, the true mastermind behind the whole thing steps out and took over. Simultaneously, they too can see how the ninja villages are played into his hands as they respond by uniting themselves. If he's still the leader, he would have done the same. The ninja village may think they are doing the right thing, but they are doing is making it easier for the Akatsuki to capture their bijus. Instead of searching and taking them one by one, the ninja villages will gather them in one place for them. They will either use them or hide them, so either way the mastermind win. Unfortunately for them, Nagato knew they won't find the Kyubi. That's because the nine-tailed Jinchuriki is a civilian, so they won't find him on the battlefield. Naruto's existence is strange, hence, even the ninja villages learning about him, they wouldn't know what to do with him. Besides, he had a feeling that he's somehow very well protected. Based on Conan's report, the Fire Lord somehow have a lot of respect for him. The man may not be a ninja, but he knew how to plan ahead. He was also the reason that Naruto's paintings are now spreading across multiple nations. There's a rumor that he and his fellow daimyos are going on a trip. Nagato had a feeling that Naruto will be tagging along. If that's true, the current Akatsuki would never find him. According to her latest intel, they dragged him along for recreation purposes. This wasn't exactly false, because instead of going to a secure safe house, the group was escorted to some secret location recently discovered. Quiet words and whispers suggested that it's some kind of paradise or Shangri-La which they wanted captured in a painting. Even God, Nagato, sweat dropped when he heard it. Is this war, or a sightseeing trip? Damn it, even he's a little curious what this paradise looked like. Coincident or not, the reason they are interested is that they found their own paradise. It's a little different from their painting, but it's still every bit they envisioned. Waterfall, forest, exotic animals, and many more. While the details pale to the real thing, the painting still stands out. Yes, they found the rumored hidden paradise they had been searching since they were children. To their surprise, it was always there, only well hidden. It's as they say, there's a bit of truth in every rumor. Had they kept looking when they were young, they probably would have found it. Thanks to Naruto's painting, it reminded them of their old dream. It gave them hope, thus pushed them to investigate. Was the paradise real? There were rumors, so it must have come from somewhere. In the end, they were rewarded. Those that do nothing will never know the truth, therefore only those that took initiative can reap the reward. Of course, there's not always a happy ending, but unless you act you won't know. While in Naruto's painting, he illustrated it being hidden behind their old home. Coincidentally, there's actually a cave passage leading them to this other world. Calling it another world is appropriate because it uses completely another ecosystem. It's hidden like a cave, yet not really a cave as it opens up from above like a volcano. Perhaps, it's one of those extinct volcanoes they wouldn't surprise if they found a hot spring because the location is warmer than outside. There are also unique birds and animals, they were more curious than hostile to strangers. So when Nagato and Conan move in and built their new home there, their animal neighbors were more than friendly as they offer the two some fruit. They assumed it's some kind of welcoming gift. Aside from the animals, another thing that Nagato noticed is that they somehow won't go near Naruto's painting. As a matter of fact, it seems like they revere it. They would keep at least a respectable meter of distance from it. That's one oddity he found before his increasing vitality condition. Although not to the point where he can walk, he could feel himself rejuvenating, not literally, but that's how great it was. He thought he's imagining it, but when his childhood friend confirms it also, he turns suspiciously to the painting. That's when Konan nominates herself to investigate and Nagato was left behind to investigate its mysteries. At first, they thought it was all because of the natural formation of the place, as they discovered even their chakra ran smoothly in this place. They had heard of places where the natural gathering of chakra is abnormal. The summoning realms of the toads are one, as their location naturally gathers sage chakra. Nevertheless, that's another mystery and perhaps another story. Anyway, during Konan's investigation, she found out a lot about the mysterious Uzu paintings. She learned about the rumored surrounding it and its special properties. Surprisingly, there's no downside. Usually, there's always a trade-off because you can't get anything for free. She and her childhood friend learned it the hard way in their youth. She considered stealing another, but she's glad she didn't when she heard about the humiliating incident with the last ninja team that tried. Was it the painting's doing or just a coincidence? However, having learned it directly from the source, she believed it's the former. There's really something about his painting. It's not that she sees Naruto as a threat, but she just wants to be sure. Having investigated a number of cases and that the owner has no ill effects, she's fairly certain that they are harmless. The results are quite astonishing, as his paintings can now be seen in nearly every country, but mostly among nobles. Apparently, they were the Fire Lord's doing, as he introduces them to the artist and set the minimum price mark at around 1 million ryo. However, most nobles eventually paid at least 10 million simply because they were very satisfied in the finished product. Konan met a few of them, thus how she found out. They weren't very secrecy about it, as they show off their latest acquisition. As it turns out, it wasn't just nobles and civilians. Rumor has it that Orochimaru also acquired one Uzu painting. Apparently, this was leaked after Sasuke Uchiha killed him and destroyed his base. The leak came from some of the survivors of the incident. Unfortunately, when Ninja Village tried to raid the place, no painting was recovered. Some say Konoha took it, some say Sasuke took it, or maybe one of the survivors, or it's destroyed during the fight. However, one thing that's certain is that the painting is missing. Back to the battlefield. Thanks to the beast's rampage, the battlefield is once again back in chaos. Chaos is normal in war, it only subsides when there's a winner. Obito overestimated his ability. He thought with his Sharingan he could control one or maybe even two Bijus. Or he could at least subjugate one and have it fight for him. Of course, he wasn't expecting the other beasts to appear, let alone rampage and joining the war. The only beast he anticipated to appear are Ichibi, Hachibi and the Kyubi. With Madara on his side, he didn't they would be a problem. Then there's also Kabuto's Edo Tensei. It was another reason why he's so confident. For obvious reasons, he doesn't trust him. Hence, he demanded the secret to the forbidden art Edo Tensei. Only then he let him participate, all just to make the ends meet. He had to admit, while he would trust him, Kabuto does have the right conditions to fight on his side. Not only did he brought with him powerful resources, he even had with him Madara. In a sense, he couldn't afford to outright dismiss him, especially when he doesn't have the Rinnegan to resurrect the legendary Madara. Nevertheless, things still didn't go as he envisioned. His plan was to have his mentor fight the Kages. With his legendary status, he's more than enough to defeat all village leaders. There's also black and white Zetsus. The white ones can be used as cannon fodder, which he can use to hold off the shinobis, whereas black Zetsu can both fight and recon. Black Zetsu is basically more powerful, thus he's insurance. Hence, with the addition of Kabuto, he didn't expect his plan to deviate that much. However, as much as he hates to admit it, it did. Sasori and Deidara are one as they literally blew up a chunk of his forces. With Deidara around, grouping his white Zetsus together is just asking for trouble as the crazy explosive literally blew them to sky high. So he was forced to separate them, thus making them easy pickings for the Shinobis and Sasori. Nagato was another surprise. Not only was the bijus being released, they easily recognize which ninjas are fakes. It's again disrupting his plan, not to mention the additional monstrous beast on the loss. Sadly, they weren't mindless as they only target the Akatsuki. As if that's not bad enough, Sasuke had to bring his Edo Tensei Hokages. Madara is maybe strong, but even he's no match against his rival. The fight was quickly escalated into a one-one-ion, and due to the Shodame's naiveness, he fell for his trap. It would have been a success had Tobirama obeyed his brother's orders. Instead, he sent a shadow clone away, whereas his real self hid to watch the exchange. In the end, he was right to be cautious as Madara tries to steal Hashirama's Sage Chakra and he intercepted just in time. As they say, there's no fairness in war, and the Shodame understood that. So with the combined efforts of the two Senju brothers, even the most powerful Uchiha couldn't guarantee a win. On the other hand, with the Edo Tensei Hokages joining the battlefield, the Akatsuki is once again on a disadvantage. Eventually, the tide turned and the Akatsuki lost. While Obito's ability was annoying, but the fourth Hokage Minato quickly figured it out. He surprised him with his advanced flying thunder god technique, Hiration. Thus, the masked Uchiha was unmasked to reveal who he is. As Obito lay dying in his own blood, he couldn't help but blaming his sensei. "Sensei, if you had this move this whole time, why didn't you use it to save Rin?" He's obviously talking about his advanced Hiration. Minato didn't respond. He will just take everything in. He will take in the blame. It's the least he can do as his sensei in his last breath. Then Obito went about the betrayal. Why? Nagato, Konan, Sasori, Deidara, why did you all betray the organization? Especially you, Nagato, why did you betray the very organization Yahiko founded? The others may not know who Nagato and Konan, but they recognize Sasori and Deidara. Only Jiraiya knew the other two. So Naruto wasn't making things up. Nagato and Konan are really alive and they were both Akatsuki. It wasn't that he didn't believe him, but circumstances made it difficult for him to just accept it without hard evidence. There are so much regret in Obito he couldn't close his eyes and rest. What he mostly couldn't understand was, where's the Kyuubi? What happened to the Kyuubi? He wanted to know. Sensei, what happened to your son? I saw you sealed the Kyuubi into him, where was he? Unfortunately, this was asked directly in front of the whole ninja alliance. The fourth Hokage had a son? This news surprised every ninja because Minato was just any ninja. He's the fourth Hokage and someone that single-handedly ended the Konoha and Iwa war. Surprisingly, it wasn't just the other nations' ninjas that are shocked. Konoha ninjas too were equally surprised. Some start to make the connection. It couldn't be the Kyuubi brat, could it? No way, I won't accept it. This got to be a trick by the Akatsuki. There's a lot of murmuring, but none dared to raise their voice to draw attention to themselves. However, deep in their conscience they already recognize Naruto, or the Kyuubi brat is indeed the fourth Hokage's son. Many of them participated in the act of his removal, thus they are more or less ashamed of what they did, especially with such underhanded tactics and on their beloved fourth Hokage's child. As for Minato, although he's surprised at the news and the whispers around him, he did not let his emotions get to him. Now that Obito mentioned it, he too wondered why he wasn't on the battlefield. Nevertheless, the whole he was silent as he held his student's hand and slowly watched the life leave his eyes. Obito's was full of regret when he died as the whole alliance watched his demise. By the end of the war, only Gaara and Killer Bee's bijus are left, whereas the others scatter. Jinchuriki were meant for war or prevention of war. Since they had just finished one that almost leads them to their annihilation, they don't want to think about it. Consider they were great assets during the fight, the beast at least for now earned their freedom. You never know, today maybe they can accept them roaming loose on the elemental nation. Who knows what happens in the future or maybe generations down the line. Hence, for now, they will leave them alone. As for the Alliance's mystery benefactors, Sasori, Deidara, Nagato, and Konan. They too left the scene and nowhere to be found. Thanks to Deidara's appearance and Obito's admittance, the Alliance knew the four were involved. Sometime after the battle, Jiraiya pulled his student aside and informed him discreetly what happened to his son. He told him everything, leaving nothing out. It was the least he could do by telling him the truth. Having listened to the whole story, Minato had mixed feelings, but in the end, he's just glad that his son found his purpose. Being born from two ninja parents does not mean he had to be a ninja, so in the end, he's just glad that he's happy. It's just too bad that he couldn't see him. As for Tsunade, she chose not to publicize Naruto's whereabouts. The teen is already a grown-up. If he doesn't want to return, it's his right. He had chosen and walked his path, so it's now the village's turn to not hold him back. Series ends here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.